You've been fed a comforting lie about what makes a man good. Let me be clear, a harmless man is not a good man. It's a weak man in disguise. And if you think strong men are dangerous, just wait. Weak men will show you how much worse true danger can be. This is a harsh truth you were never supposed to hear. It feels counterintuitive, almost offensive, because society told you to be gentle, to never show aggression. They said your harmlessness made you virtuous. But in reality, that very harmlessness can hide a ticking time bomb. Most people won't acknowledge this. They cling to the illusion that weakness equals innocence. But you're here because some part of you senses the cracks in that story. You can feel that something is wrong with the easy answers you've been given about how to behave as a man. Listen closely. Weakness does not make you good. It just makes you weak. A man who refuses to confront his own capacity for aggression isn't harmless at all. He is vulnerable. And that vulnerability doesn't evaporate. It ferments into resentment, into spite, into the very evil he wanted to avoid. Picture the man who spends his life avoiding conflict, always saying yes, swallowing his anger. On the surface, he is agreeable and polite, but inside, he is boiling. Each time he bites his tongue, every injustice he endures feeds a dark shadow growing within him. One day, that shadow takes control. Maybe it's a sudden explosion of rage at someone who didn't deserve it. Maybe it's years of passive-aggressive sabotage, hurting everyone around him, quietly. Either way, the nice man who avoided all confrontation becomes a source of chaos. His weakness mutates into cruelty. History is filled with atrocities, committed not by obviously strong or evil men, but by weak, obedient men. Men who lacked the courage to stand up, who followed orders blindly out of fear. They let their sense of powerlessness curdle into cruelty, doing unspeakable things when given a sliver of authority. Think of the bureaucrat who signs off on injustices because he's too timid to refuse, or the zealot who latches onto a violent ideology because it makes him feel briefly powerful after a lifetime of feeling small. These weak men justify their actions with bitterness, and innocence is nowhere to be found in their deeds. Even in fiction and myth, the greatest horrors often stem from weakness. Dr. Jekyll wanted to be only good, too afraid to face his darker urges, so he split himself in two. The result was Mr. Hyde, a monster unleashed because the good doctor tried to deny that evil within him instead of controlling it. Consider the biblical story of Cain and Abel. Cain felt small, rejected, unnoticed next to his successful brother. In his weakness, he let envy fester into hatred and struck Abel down. The first murder in Scripture wasn't born from strength. It was born from the weak ego of a man who refused to master his resentment. Carl Jung warned that everyone carries a shadow, the dark side of their soul. And the less you acknowledge it, the more it controls you from the shadows. Weak men refuse to admit they have a capacity for anger and aggression, and in that denial, their darkest impulses gain the upper hand. You might think rejecting your own capacity for harm makes you pure. It doesn't. It makes you ignorant of yourself. The anger and aggression you refuse to confront don't disappear. They simply find covert ways to seep out. A man blind to his own darkness ends up a puppet of that darkness. Look around at the men who are utterly lost, bitter at the world, blaming everyone else for their misery. They were promised that if they just stayed nice and pliable, life would reward them. It was a lie. Now they stew in disappointment. That disappointment curdles into resentment, then into quiet revenge against a world they see as unjust. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you feel some of that anger at life. Maybe you've done everything you thought was right and still feel invisible, disrespected, empty. That feeling is real and dangerous. Left to rot, it turns you into the kind of person who wants to make others hurt too. This is an urgent wake-up call. not just for you but for society. We're producing legions of disempowered young men told that any assertiveness is toxic. They're told to be soft, to suppress every competitive or aggressive instinct, and so they comply, becoming increasingly passive, depressed, and enraged underneath. A man who has been convinced that his natural strength is evil doesn't become good, he becomes weak, and a weak man, aching from a life of surrender and self-loathing, can manifest that pain in forms you don't expect. Self-destruction, substance abuse, or explosions of violence toward anyone unfortunate enough to be nearby when his dam breaks. Weak men avoid responsibility because responsibility is weight, and they feel too feeble to carry it. So they let others pick up their slack. They retreat into distractions and comforts, but all the while, deep down, they know they're not pulling their weight. That knowledge eats at them. It makes them bitter at those who do step up. They lack self-discipline too. Why? Because discipline means saying no to yourself, fighting your own impulses. And they've never fought anything, so their desires rule them. They reach for quick highs and run from discomfort. Each indulgence that should bring joy instead brings guilt, because they know it's another sign of their weakness. And as all these small cowardices and failures add up, resentment grows. Resentment toward the successful, toward the confident, toward anyone who has what they don't. In the mind of a weak man, the world becomes the enemy. He tells himself that everyone else is corrupt or cruel to justify why he hasn't gotten what he wants. This is the psychology that breeds real danger. Because the man who feels the whole world is against him feels justified in fighting back in ugly ways. He tells himself he's the victim, so any nasty thing he does is just him claiming what he is owed. That's how weak men rationalize acts that the rest of us consider unthinkable. How many times have you seen it? The quiet, resentful man who finally snaps and harms others in a blaze of misguided fury. The former nice guy who never addressed his own emptiness and decides to punish everyone he believes wronged him. These aren't just stories, they're headlines, they're happening now, and they're a product of cultivated weakness. This is Jordan Peterson's warning. If you think strong men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men will do. He is not glorifying aggression, he is warning against passivity that breeds monstrosity. He knows that a man with no real strength can't restrain himself when anger finally does arm him with a little power. True goodness is not the same as harmlessness. Real virtue comes from having power, strength, and the capacity for violence, and then choosing not to use it, except when you must. A good man is a dangerous man who has that danger under voluntary control. It's discipline, not docility, that makes a good man. Think of the soldiers who see the horror of war up close and return with a quiet calm. They know what violence is, so they don't seek it needlessly. Or the martial artist who trains to be lethal, yet walks away from pointless fights. The strongest men tend to be gentle, precisely because they understand their own strength. By contrast, a man who's never understood or developed his strength is a loose cannon. Give him a little authority or a moment of power, and it goes straight to his head. He doesn't know how to handle it. He's never learned to master himself, so he certainly can't master the temptation to throw his weight around. All the truly dangerous men I've known in life had one thing in common. They were weak. Not physically weak, necessarily, but weak of spirit. No self-control, no self-awareness, no capacity to delay gratification. That made them unpredictable, prone to outbursts, manipulators or cowards who struck when backs were turned. On the other hand, the most admirable men shared a different trait. They were dangerous, but you'd hardly know it at a glance. They carried themselves with confidence and restraint. They had teeth, but kept them sheathed. You only realized their power was there if circumstances absolutely required them to show it. We need men like that, now more than ever. Men who can be monsters, yet choose not to be. Men who could break others, yet devote themselves to protecting and uplifting. Without those men standing as examples, the ones rotting in their weakness will drag everything down into chaos. This is a confrontation, for you and for every man listening who feels lost or angry or small. It's not meant to shame you. It's meant to shake you awake. Because the path you might be on, the path of least resistance and quiet bitterness, leads to a dead end and a dark place. If you feel disempowered by life, if you feel the world has been unfair to you, understand this: staying weak is not the answer. Letting that bitterness stew will only corrupt you further. No one is coming to magically make it better. You have to stand up and find your own strength. Strength doesn't mean bullying others or being cruel. It means developing the ability to be formidable so that you never have to be cruel. It means you can bite, but you keep your teeth hidden until there's real justification to use them. It's controlled power. It's courage and competence in equal measure. Ask yourself, what kind of man do you want to be? The one who pretends he's an angel and ends up a devil in disguise? Or the one who admits he could be a devil and then works every day to be a good man instead? Only one of these paths leads to any real place in the end. Choosing strength and discipline is not easy. It means facing discomfort, taking on burdens you'd rather avoid, and wrestling with your own inner demons. It's far simpler to stay weak and tell yourself you're righteous for it, but that simplicity is a trap. It leaves you at the mercy of forces within and without. When you start embracing responsibility, something shifts. The anger that had nowhere to go finds a direction. Carrying weight, maybe it's a job, a family duty, a commitment to better yourself, gives purpose to your pain. You begin to feel something unexpected, meaning, a reason to withstand the hardship rather than avoid it. Discipline, too, becomes freedom. It sounds paradoxical. How can self-denial make you freer? But the man who can command himself is not a slave to impulse. He is not chained by his appetites or fears. Every time you hold yourself to a standard, you break one of the chains that used to control you. Little by little, you stop being that fragile, resentful version of yourself. You toughen up, not just externally, but deep in your soul. The next time life unfairly punches you, you don't immediately look for someone to blame or someone to hurt. You absorb it. You learn from it. You get stronger. This is how a man transforms. Not overnight in a blaze of glory, but slowly through daily choices to face what's uncomfortable. Every time you confront a fear, every time you take responsibility when you could have passed it on, you reclaim a piece of your better nature. Your shadow doesn't disappear, but it becomes an ally instead of an enemy. You realize that the capacity for anger, for aggression, even for violence, is part of you, but it doesn't have to control you. In fact, once you see it and harness it, it becomes a source of controlled power. You can protect, you can create boundaries, you can stand up for what's right, because now you're strong enough to do so. The irony is that by becoming more dangerous, you become safer for yourself and for everyone else. People can trust a man who keeps his sword sheathed until it's needed. They cannot trust a man who claims he has no sword and then cuts them in secret. True safety comes from character, born out of facing your own potential for harm. Now you see the bigger picture. Weak men aren't harmless. They never were. And strong men, the right kind of strong men, aren't a threat. They're a blessing. We need good men who are dangerous far more than we need men who are simply too weak to be bad. This understanding is stark, even frightening, but it opens your eyes to reality. It can be disturbing to realize how darkness works within us, but knowledge is power. Now you can choose which side of yourself to feed. You're no longer blindly controlled by the lie that denying your strength makes you good. You see the truth for what it is, and with that clarity comes the responsibility to change. So what will you do with this insight? Now that you can no longer pretend you don't know, will you let it scare you back into passivity? Or will you let it motivate you to grow? The world will carry on either way, but your world, your life, depends on this choice. No one else can make it for you. This moment is a crossroads. Stay weak and nothing improves. Worse, you risk sliding further into that dangerous resentment we've explored. Become strong and disciplined, and you become part of the solution to your own suffering and to the chaos around you. The road forward is challenging, yes, but at least it's real. It's worth it. If you stay still, you'll slip back into darkness, back into the quiet despair and hidden rage you know too well. But one step, even a small step toward responsibility and strength, will start to wake you up. And once you're awake, you know what awaits. A life with eyes open, at last. This knowledge is not easy. It's not supposed to be. But it's a form of power. Uncomfortable, yes, but empowering. Now you see how the game really works. Now you see that true goodness is born from confronting evil, especially the evil within ourselves. And that realization arms you with the conviction to do better. It's time to confront your weakness head on, not tomorrow or someday, but now. Look in the mirror and see the man you are, and the man you could be if you dare to become more dangerous and disciplined. Life already has enough harmless men hiding away. What it needs, what you need, is a man willing to stand firm and face the truth. Most people won't get this far, but I suspect you're different. If you've listened to this truth to the end, you're one of the few willing to face it. That sets you apart. It means there is something in you that refuses to settle for the easy lie. Hold on to that spark. It's the beginning of your strength. Before we close, I'm going to ask you for one act of honesty. In the comments below, write one sentence, just one, that tells the truth you've been avoiding. Not a reaction, not a slogan, but a single brutally honest sentence. Let it mark the moment you stopped lying to yourself. If you stay silent and do nothing, nothing will change. But if you speak, even in one sentence of truth, you've taken a step. A small step toward owning your own story, toward breaking the pattern of weakness. Sometimes admitting the truth in words is the first act of real strength. Consider that your first challenge. Disappear, live, and when you're ready, come back. I'll be waiting where I always am, on the edge, where it all begins.